Hey again everybody, it's Ditkaz, and in today's video, we're gonna get into a topic that might make some people a little mad. Solo leveling and why I think that it's overhyped and overrated. Now when I say overhyped, I'm referring primarily to the anime series, and when I say overrated, I'm referring to the series as a whole, but especially the webtoon, which I read after the anime started airing. I've got a few different thoughts on this, but a lot of this kind of started looking back at the reception that Solo Leveling got whenever it first started airing, where everyone on Twitter was talking about it being, or at least everyone I saw on Twitter was talking about it being like peak fiction and better than any shonen or seinen manga that you could read out there, specifically comparing it to certain other series where they would make certain complaints about these series. But then looking back on it after I started reading it, Solo Leveling has a lot of the same problems that they talk about in that show, in some cases even worse, in my opinion. Now I'm not going to go into specifics about what shows I would be comparing that reception to. Again, it's just not something that I think is important to this. I'm also not coming here with receipts because I never thought I was going to make a video like this back whenever they were being posted on Twitter, and I'm not going to go scouring the internet looking for these old tweets from who knows how many different creators out there. There's going to be some spoilers for the series in this video, so if you don't want to see those, whether it's because you are just waiting for the next season of the anime, or you are currently reading the webtoon and don't want to see that stuff before getting caught up, you're going to want to hold off on continuing this video until you're caught up. So anyways, we're going to get into it. I want to start before I get into the negatives by repeating some of the positives that I've said about this series in the past. In both the webtoon and the anime, the art is very, very well done. The characters as a whole look great with interesting designs that make each of the more important characters very distinct, and the fight scenes are incredible. The fights in the webtoon are incredible with their details and the fast-paced motion just kind of like jumping off the page at you. And I felt that the anime did a really good job of adapting that to the screen. The story concept of Solo Leveling, the base story concept, is actually really interesting, and it's executed very well in the first part of the series, with the first season of the anime all being part of what I would consider is the good part of the story, and the next season, possibly two, depending on pacing, should follow suit to that before it starts getting to the point where I think the story starts falling downhill. With that out of the way, let's get to the main point of this video. As I said, the story, in my opinion, is good in the first part of Solo Leveling, but it's by no means groundbreaking in any way or anything super special. It's just that it's adequate. It works for what they're trying to tell you. And the way they end up going with the story, though, is probably the least interesting method that they could have went with. The whole thing with Jinwoo basically becoming the new incarnation of a godlike being is just a really boring choice, in my opinion. It's been seen and done just so many different times. And I feel like they could have done almost any other reason for him to have like this system that he gets basically put into that lets him get stronger and stronger when other people can't. And I think it would have been better and would have made like a better long-term plot. Also, as a note on story, all the time whenever this series was first coming out, you see people talking about how great the series is, but no one ever brought up complaints about Jinwoo being incredibly OP. Now, sure, that's the point of the story, he becomes OP, but like he always has just the right thing he needs, or just the right thing in a situation before he gets to that point where he can basically just ignore everything else. And there's so many other series out there that everybody complains about, these same people would be complaining about, and they just gloss it over in Solo Leveling, but want to make it a big deal if it happens in another series. The next point, or couple of points that I want to make, revolve around Jinwoo as a character. First, and I know I've said this before, but I don't think there was any need to have Jinwoo's physical appearance change so much to the point that he goes from being some average-looking wimpy dude to someone who's like a foot taller and ripped, and he just looks like a model to the point that the other characters barely recognize him as being the same person. I just think it's unnecessary to take this main character and literally make him look so much different from his original look in the first few chapters that he shares almost nothing in common with the character and looks almost nothing like him other than having the same hair color. The other point is that Jinwoo becomes a very bland and boring character, especially compared to so many of the other characters in the series. In the beginning, he's more emotional and expressive, and he just becomes like this stone-faced, stoic, like boring nobody, in my opinion, as it goes on. Even with his more handsome look, he's still a more subdued design as well, compared to characters like Baek Yoonho or even Choi Jong-in, or to use characters from later in the series who haven't been introduced in the anime yet, Thomas Andre or Liu Zhigang, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm not very good at pronouncing Chinese names a lot. the latter of which I'll be coming back to in a later point. Other than his character design, I think it's really annoying how Jinwoo seems to struggle to remember people's names once he starts getting stronger and stronger, I don't remember that being hinted at in the first few chapters prior to that in the series. The next thing I want to talk about is the romance aspects of the series. I feel like they really dropped the ball with Lee Joo-hee. They introduce her right in the beginning of the series, and she's a decently interesting character who's clearly got at least somewhat of a romantic interest in Jinwoo. They let her kind of disappear after that initial bit in the Kartanon Temple, and then they bring her back just to show that her reaction basically to Jinwoo changing and getting stronger, and then she retires and moves back home, and then you don't see her again until like a couple little scenes here or there towards the very, very end of the series. The very beginning of the series, I thought for sure that they were going to be trying to build up this relationship between her and Jinwoo, and it seems like it works. They have chemistry, and like they knew it, and they knew each other from before the series started, and it just seemed like a natural progression of things, but instead it just goes nowhere. I mean, to the point that where they promised to eventually meet up for food or coffee or something, and it just never happens, at least not on screen. Instead, we get Cha-Ha-in, who in my opinion is a less interesting character than Joo-hee, but she also doesn't get as much build-up. In the anime, she's a little more prominent, how she's in from like the very first episode. They have that scene with her stopping the guys who steal that purse on that motorcycle, and she's kind of in a few different scenes throughout the first season, and none of that stuff is in the webtoon. It might be in like an original novelization of it. I don't know. I haven't read that. Again, the webtoon is the adaptation of it that I would know of as like older than the anime. In the webtoon, they talk about her and they show her silhouette early on, but she doesn't get introduced until a spot later, like that would be sometime in like season 2 of the anime. And honestly, whenever they do finally introduce her, she's mostly just used as a way to show that Jinwoo is different from other hunters. She doesn't really show a whole lot of emotion at first in like her first few chapters that they show her in, until she starts becoming interested in Jinwoo because of the whole thing with how she has her sensitive nose and doesn't like the scent of hunters, but Jinwoo doesn't smell like a hunter to her, so it like intrigues her. And that's whenever she kind of starts becoming more of a fleshed out character that's not just like a mindless robot that's just really, really strong according to their thing. And that's the thing, that's another point with her, is they present her as one of the stronger characters in the series, but she never really gets to make an impact in that way. By the time she's introduced in the story, they've already had power creep to the point where she's basically an afterthought. Between the introduction of national level hunters like Thomas Andre and Yu Zhigong, and the more really strong monsters like the Ant King, or even worse, the Monarchs when they get introduced. This causes her to basically just be a damsel in distress whenever she does happen to appear in the story, if it's any kind of a combat situation. And her relationship with Jinwoo has no actual build-up. It's literally just her meeting him, saying, he doesn't smell like a hunter, I'm kind of interested in him. This leads to her actually kind of starting to not just have an interest in like, how is he so strong? Is he really a hunter? To maybe I have romantic feelings for this guy because I can't get him out of my head. And then she tries to join his guild that he starts, and he's like, no, I'm good. And she keeps asking. He's like, are you interested in me or something? She says, yes, I am. And then it just kind of sits there until the very end of the series, pretty much, when right before the last fight, Jin was about to go off thinking, I might not live through this, and he decides to take her out on a date, and seemingly on that random date, he's now in love with her after showing no real interest in her as a person at all, outside of wondering why she keeps asking to join his guild. I would have less issue with their relationship if there was more build up to it and it felt like it was earned. Again, I feel like there's more chemistry between Jinwoo and Joo-hee in the first like 20 chapters or however many it is of the webtoon than there is with him and Cha-Ha-in in the entire series. Back to power creep, this series takes it to an insane level. The series starts out with a very simple power system of hunters from power ranks E at the lowest to S at the highest, and each of those tiers has kind of a range of power and skill amongst those various hunters. Then kind of almost out of nowhere, they introduce the national level hunters, and the whole concept of them at least, and those hunters make the regular S rank hunters like Baek, Choi, and Cha basically look like nobodies at this point. They talk about a number of these national level hunters, but they only really show like 3 or 4 of them, and at least one of them dies before getting to do anything other than kind of say his name and transform into this special form and make a big deal about not going down without a fight, just to pretty much die instantly at that point, and you don't get to see him. He's in like 3 panels of it. Basically, the rest of the national level hunters are only considered really, really strong for a couple chapters before the Monarchs are introduced, and then they're basically no better than fodder compared to Jinwoo and the other Monarchs. Of these, the one who I think gets done the worst is Liu Zhigong, who they show this really cool silhouette of him like killing this giant that Jinwoo fails to kill right away as it's like heading to China, and they make it seem like this guy's a badass, and then nothing really happens with him. He has like 2 conversations with Jinwoo and shows that he's going to be involved in this fight, but you never actually get to see this dude fight or do anything at all. He never gets to really be cool, even though he's set up to be this really cool guy. Again, him and like Thomas Andre and then these other national level hunters that they talk about that you never get to see could have been this really cool thing, but because of the power creep in the series, they never get to really affect anything, and that also causes the S rank hunters to basically not be much of a factor. So if they wouldn't have had as much power creep, the S ranks and the national level hunters could have been more of a factor in the whole thing, and the series could have been more interesting if they were actually stronger compared to the enemies that were being fought than they were by the end of the series. The last thing I want to bring up is, again, how I feel that the storyline just gets worse as it goes on. The webtoon is broken into 2 seasons, and the first season is way better than the second. The first season is where the story as a whole is at least good, so being lifted up by the excellent and incredible art, it makes it to where the series as a whole, at least in that first half, is arguably an excellent overall product. The second half quickly starts going downhill, with each arc being worse and worse than the last, culminating in one of the worst endings in a story that I've ever read. The story in the second season is so bad that even the continued great art can't keep my full judgment of the second season from being that it's kind of shitty, and it makes the series as a whole go from being good to just being okay, maybe even slightly below average. Going back to the ending, it was super frustrating for me seeing this ending where Jinwoo and all the other characters fought so hard and had to give up so much, people were sacrificed and lost, to finally beat all these bad guys just for Jinwoo to look at these other godlike beings and get them to use this last chance of this ability to turn back time to before the gates opened and everyone gained all their powers. But Jinwoo retained his powers in his memory, and then he disappears for a couple years to go fight all the bad guys ahead of time by himself, wipes them all out, and basically makes it to where all the losses and sacrifices that were made in the story up to that point didn't actually happen, and it was all pointless, and it's almost like, why even have the whole series at this point? It just felt incredibly cheap and like a really lame way to end that story, especially after the way, again, it starts in the very beginning and has so much promise, and that's like this lame duck that it ends on. All these points are why I say that the entire series of Solo Leveling is overrated, and that caused the anime to be overhyped. Now, I do want to keep reiterating that I did enjoy the first season of the Solo Leveling anime, and I mostly enjoyed the webtoon, but I'm a very easy guy to please. I like almost everything as long as it's not the absolute worst thing you could ever imagine. But I can enjoy something and think it's overrated, like Naruto, which we might get into later if I'm brave enough to open that can of worms. As always, I hope everyone enjoyed this video, and if so, that you'll give it a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to leave a comment, especially if there was something that I misunderstood or misremembered from reading the webtoon, or if you have a different viewpoint on the points that I made in this video. Because, in my opinion, civil discussion on things like this are always fun and welcome. If you want to see more of my content, you can check out my game streams on Twitch at twitch.tv/Ditkaz. That's Ditkaz. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great day.